Pleased to welcome back to the Schilling Show Joel Gardner, president of the Jefferson Council, and today's topic, UVA in the news or not. Hey, Joel, welcome back.
Thanks, Rob. It's always a pleasure being on the show.
I want to start off with the firing of the UVA directors. I mean, the governor's gone mad and seized power and done a lot of unconventional things. What's going on?
Well, what we've seen over the past 6 months is shocking and stunning in its audacity and pure political muscle flexing. The actions, first by the General Assembly, actually by a standing committee of one of the houses of the General Assembly, and then by Governor Spanberger, ignores every norm and every historical precedent in the history of the Commonwealth. And what we've seen is a well-planned and well-orchestrated, politicized, hostile takeover of the UVA board. These steps, all unprecedented in the history of the Commonwealth. First, you had the Standing Committee of the Senate of the General Assembly rejecting 5 Board of Visitor appointees, giving no reason and with no debate, and never had a General Assembly, I think, rejected one member appointed by a governor, no less 5, at the University of Virginia. So that brought down the number of board members from 17 to 12, and after they instigated, they started questioning the legitimacy of the board after they had rejected the 5. But then, a day before Governor-elect Spanberger was to become governor, she requested the resignations of 5 further members of the board. And when you look at the board members that were, in essence, fired, because they would have been fired if they hadn't resigned, it's stunning. The people involved who had worked hard and selflessly for the board, who had put in hundreds and hundreds of hours in service to the university, and again, asked for their resignations with no reason given. But we know why, probably for each one of the 5, it was done. If you get into the weeds and you hear and listen, you know why. And I mean, but the one that stands out the most is Paul Manning, a Charlottesville resident. While not a graduate of the university, has been dedicated to the university, donated $100 million for a new biotech center. And this man, who is not raucous, not overbearing, not overly political, but he just got involved, I guess, and you can see in a flurry of letters that went back and forth by Jim Ryan, was involved, as were many members of the board, with the Justice Department, because they were investigating the university.
Right.
And it was the board's role to interact with them. I mean, basically, they fired the rector and the vice rector for interacting with the Justice Department, which is part of their role, and coming up at the end of the day with the most favorably negotiated settlement of any university in the country. And these people were fired on day one. But we all know, again, who are try to get the inside information of what is going on, that this was all getting rid of these members, getting rid of the other members, was all part of a well-orchestrated, well-organized cabal of people, which included Jim Ryan and mostly his friends and supporters, former board members, wealthy alumni, and faculty. And there's been a plan for a long time to implement this. And we know, we've heard from multiple sources, that this group had hired a very high-powered stakeholder strategic firm to help them orchestrate this plan. And now, because, thanks to Washington Post FOIAing board correspondence, although we had issued a similar FOIAs and gotten stonewalled, they did respond to the Washington Post FOIA. And there are almost 950 pages of text between or among various board members and other members of the administration. And it becomes very clear. I've read every page of it. We've now posted it on the Jefferson Council website for those who really want to know. And what you read in there is astonishing, particularly the text coming from the then Rector Robert Hardie. And you see a lot of this there. Sometimes you have to know who the people they're talking about because they only use initials or they say that person. But anyone in the know knows exactly who they're talking about, what they're talking about. But it is, for those faculty members, many of whom are part of this cabal, who are crying all the time about a lack of transparency and lack of accountability. There has never been a board under Robert Hardie, and the rector has enormous powers at UVA historically, that has been less transparent and has had less accountability than the board under his leadership. And he did everything in his power to squelch any attempts to get information from members of the administration and tried to marginalize any board member that in any way was proposing elements that were in opposition to his and Jim Ryan's game plan. Anybody who had alternative views on how to approach the budget, on who wanted to lower tuition and to cut the budget, were marginalized, minimalized, kept off committees, and when you read this, called vile names by then Rector Hardie.
This is so disturbing on so many levels. We're talking with Joel Gardner, president of the Jefferson Council, UVA in the news or not. We continue into our final segment, so much more to say. And if you have a comment or a question, 977-1070, Schilling Show back in just a moment. All right, the Schilling Show heading into our final segment, continuing with President of the Jefferson Council, Joel Gardner. So much going on at UVA that's not good. Joel, before we go into the healthcare system, I just wanted to ask you a question because I've been troubled by the procedural problems that you reference. And it seems to me the Democrats are getting ready to make institutional and permanent changes in the process, which would almost ensure a progressive governance of UVA long into the future.
Yeah, they're talking about extending the number of years that each board member serves, so that the board members appointed by this governor now would go beyond. So if there was a Republican governor who came in 4 years, wouldn't be able to have the same effect. They're talking about bringing in voting members on the board, making, the faculty and student members who are right now non-voting members of the board, voting members of the board. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've never witnessed at any level a power play that has been going on for the past 6 months. These are people who constantly talk about the importance of democracy, and they couldn't care less about democracy, and they certainly could not care less about having diverse viewpoints. I mean, the whole plan being implemented is and was implemented by Rector Hardie was to suppress and crush any attempt to vocalize diverse viewpoints. I mean, think about it. One of the major points, and you'll see this come up in these texts, is that they were trying to cut what is clearly an incredibly bloated budget, particularly administratively bloated. I mean, you could cut percentages off that, but any attempt to cut the budget and then to reduce tuition was being shunned, undermined, and then criticized. I mean, you know, all these students, take a look at what the students are paying today in tuition. I mean, it was, the problem here, Rob, was that for years and years, the board did not exercise its oversight. The Board of Visitors of the University of Virginia is mandated and is given the power of governance at the University of Virginia. But particularly for Jim Ryan, up until Glenn Youngkin's election, he had free rein. The board under the prior rectors stood by, watched, and just allowed him to do basically whatever he wanted. And that's what he was used to. And when some board members came in who said, hey, we think there are some other ideas here that are worthwhile, you know, you're exercising too much power, for instance, on this, there was a SIF, SIF as an acronym, amount of money, which I think was around $100 million, which was basically Jim Ryan's own piggy bank, which he had negotiated for when he became president. When they said there has to be some controls, there were huge objections. I mean, he had a $100 million piggy bank to utilize to build loyalty amongst the faculty and other members of the administration with no control, no oversight. And this lack of oversight certainly came home with the scandal in the health systems.
Yeah, this is important, and this is outrageous because the media, the local media, has said very little, if anything, outside of this program. Maybe one or two other places talked about it a little bit. But if you would, please, and we have about 5 minutes left, Joel, give us a thumbnail of this report because it has a lot of damning information within.
Well, the report, which we received by FOIA, our Freedom of Information Act, was prepared by the council for 36 of the concerned physicians and was submitted to the Board of Visitors on the same day that the Williams and Connolly submitted what was some type of a report. We've heard different things about it, that we know that Williams and Connolly submitted some type of writing to the board on the same day, which was collected at the end of that meeting, never distributed. The other report by the Physicians Council was never made public. But I couldn't even summarize. There is so much in there, so much discussing the wrongdoing by those running the health services community, that one really, if people who want to know should be reading it. But the thing about it is that all the damning information contained therein on hirings, on how certain member doctors were treated, were not given the resources they needed, It goes on and on and on. Potential financial irregularities. Apparently, there's still over $1 million missing that's never been accounted. There's all of this in there, and yet nobody has really publicized it. I mean, where is the press? I mean, and to a lot of us, the most important factor there was that then President Jim Ryan was aware of many, if not most, if not all of this information early on, years before it became public, and he never did anything material to deal with these significant issues which were voiced by so many physicians. I mean, he belittled the physicians, the 128, I believe, of the physicians who came out with their letter. He criticized them, said, well, it's only 128. Well, go read, if you read these texts from the board, one board member says to Hardie, I've heard that there were 500 more doctors that were ready to sign that. And Hardie responded to that with an emphasis point. They knew how important this was, and yet no one was ready to deal with it. Well, Jim Hardie, as we all know, and Jim Ryan were, linked at the hip.
Yes.
And most of what Hardie was doing was to defend Ryan, promote Ryan, and even when the board knew, the rector knew about it, really nothing done until those two reports were submitted on the same day at the same board meeting. And at that board meeting, right then and there, they asked for Craig Kent's resignation. I mean, the truth behind what went on in the healthcare system, we can only rely on the testimony of these doctors as to what was the truth, because they haven't been materially countered.
And it seems, and we're just about out of time with Joel Gardner, but it seems to me that there's, at least to the point, there is no accountability whatsoever for people who did bad things at UVA, and I hope that changes. Joel, tell us again, if people want to see these texts or if they want to see the report about the healthcare system and the scandal there, where they can do that.
They can find those on our website, and it's jeffersoncouncil.org. And I think the problem we face, and this is the entire community, is the lack of knowledge, the lack of information that is presented to them. The calls for transparency are important. We need transparency and accountability, and that did not exist under Jim Ryan, and it did not exist under Robert Hardie's board.
We're so glad that you have exposed these things and continue to do the most important work. Joel Gardner, thanks for joining us once again on The Schilling Show.
Thanks, Rob. It's good talking to you.
And you, and much more to come, I'm sure, as this develops further.